Good evening to you. My name's Steve Walford. If I could focus you back in. As Matt explained earlier, we're continuing to look at this preaching series called Transforming for Good, based on a book in the Bible called Nehemiah. It details probably the greatest DIY project the world has ever seen, dwarfs by far anything you'll have seen on Grand Designs or other programs like that. If you're new to us, just a very brief bit of background. This story takes place around about 420 BC, would you believe? And the nation of Israel are in exile. Jerusalem is in ruins. There's only a relative handful of people living there. And they are covered in shame, really. Not only have they been defeated, but they are feeling dejected about the whole situation. And then God remarkably opens a way for one of the exiles in a distant country, Nehemiah himself, to actually come back to Jerusalem, to lead a rebuilding project. And when he arrives, he wastes no time in getting the leaders together and the priests together and inviting them to rebuild the wall. Now, undoubtedly, he is an impressive man, but this is a massive project for a dispirited and unskilled bunch of people. So their response, I believe, can only be explained by the activity of the Holy Spirit in their hearts. And they respond in 6 simple words to Nehemiah. They say, "Let us rise up and build." And we join the story. We've got as far as Nehemiah chapter 3, and this is a remarkable chapter, as you will find out in just a moment. Basically, it's a list of name after unpronounceable name of those involved and what they accomplished. And we're not going to read the whole chapter. I think that would be a bit too much for you. Just going to read the first 15 verses. And the temptation is just to switch off and think, this is just a bunch of names. What I want you to think about as you hear these names is to catch something of the atmosphere, something of the spirit of these people, something that was taking place in that period of time. There's an urgency, an energy, an enthusiasm, a resolve, and a sense of being in this together. They didn't just say, "We will rise up and build." They actually did it. There's a lot of people that say something, but they don't actually follow through. This group of people followed through. So here we go. Please pray for me. Chapter 3, verse 1. Then Eliashib, the high priest, rose up with his brothers the priests, and they built the sheep gate. They consecrated it, set up its doors. They consecrated it as far as the Tower of the 100, as far as the Tower of Hananel. And next to him, the men of Jericho built. And next to them, Zachar, the son of Imri, built. The sons of Hassenaah built the fish gate. They laid its beams and set up its doors, its bolts, and its bars. And next to them, Merimoth, the son of Uriah, son of Hakkoz, repaired. And next to them, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, the son of Meshezabel, repaired. And next to them, Zadok, the son of Baana, repaired. And next to them, the Tekoites repaired. But their nobles would not stoop to serve their Lord. Joiada, the son of Paseah, and Meshullam, the son of Besadiah, repaired the gate of Yeshana. They laid its beams and set up its doors, its bolts, and its bars. And next to them repaired Melatiah the Gibeonite, and Jadon the Meronothite, the men of Gibeon and of Mizpah, the seat of the governor of the province beyond the river. Next to them, Uziel, the son of Harhaiah, goldsmiths, repaired. Next to him, Hananiah, one of the perfumers, repaired, and they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Next to them, Rephaiah, the son of Hur, ruler of half the district of Jerusalem, repaired. Next to them, Jedaiah, the son of Harumaph, repaired, opposite his house. And next to him, Hattush, the son of Hashabniah, repaired. Malchijah, the son of Harim, and Hashab, the son of Paheth Moab, repaired another section and the Tower of the Ovens. Next to him, Shallum, the son of Halohesh, ruler of half the district of Jerusalem, repaired, he and his daughters. Hanan and the inhabitants of Zanoah repaired the valley gate. They rebuilt it and set up its doors, its bolts, and its bars, and repaired 1,000 cubits of the wall as far as the dung gate. Malchijah, the son of Rechab, ruler of the district of Beth-Hakkerem, repaired the dung gate. He rebuilt it and set up its doors, its bolts, and its bars. And Shallum, the son of Kolhose, ruler of the district of Mizpah, repaired the fountain gate. He rebuilt it and covered it and set up its doors, its bolts, and its bars. And he built the wall of the pool of Shelah of the king's garden, as far as the steps that go down from the city of David. I'm not going to read the rest because there's some complicated names in the rest. I'm going to stop there. And I want to put up this plan for you to have a look at this. If you've got a bit lost in that description, then just a lot of the gates and the walls are mentioned on this plan. I hope you can see it. I'm putting it up there for you just to catch what's happened in this story, because I think it's quite remarkable that really a bunch of very ordinary people like you and me accomplished this. They built a massive city wall. They were unskilled laborers. And you may think, well, great, but so what? What's the relevance of this? Well, I think it encourages us to think, what can we build in our generation? If they could do that then, because God was at work in them, what can God do with us? And I think there's a number of things about this building story that are relevant to us now and this day and age. Firstly, at very least, it reveals two important facets of human nature. Firstly, as human beings, we tend to like building things, whether it's ships, bank accounts, Lego sets, cupcakes, relationships, families, share portfolios, house extensions, whatever it is, human beings love to build. And the Bible shows that God is a creative builder. He created this entire universe, and we are made in his image. So there's a builder in all of us. The trouble is that sometimes we spend too long building the wrong things, building the things that do not last. But if you're a Christian here tonight, if you're someone that's got a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, I hope you realize this, but you've been invited into the greatest building project that's taking place on planet Earth. It eclipses these walls of Nehemiah, it eclipses the Great Wall of China, the Shard, any other building project that you can think of. You see, Jesus is building his worldwide church. Now that's bigger than us. It's bigger than CCK. And he's inviting us to join him in this massive task. Now for us here in CCK, along with other churches in this city, it's like our section of the wall is this city. It's like we're repairing the wall in Brighton and Hove. In one sense, it's a bit like we're building a city within the city of Brighton and Hove. And this is a great city, but I'm sure you'll have to agree that in many ways it is a broken city. There are all kinds of statistics about our city that are actually higher than the national average. There's things going here that indicate the walls have broken down and something needs to be rebuilt. I heard recently that an increasing number of children in our schools are turning up at school hungry because there's nothing for them to eat at home. This city also has high statistics compared to the rest of the nation for children being taken into care, but then not placed with foster families, for drug-related deaths, for domestic violence, for unwanted children being aborted, for teenage pregnancies, for people living rough, and so on. This city does need an alternative city that models how different a community can be when Jesus is at its center. Now, there's a second thing that this passage reveals about human nature. It applies to all of us, whether we're Christians or not. One, firstly, as I've said, we're builders at heart. Secondly, we like team. We like being part of a team. Even if you would not consider yourself a people person, you're a bit of an individualist or a loner, or find it difficult to relate to people. Nevertheless, deep down in every human being, there's a desire to belong, to be part of a community that's got a common bond. There's a desire to be part of a team or to identify with a team, particularly with a successful team. Just think back to the Olympics a couple of years ago, and you'll know what that did to us as a nation. And again, I would say this comes from God, because God is a team player. God exists in team, in the community, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and they work together in complete harmony to get things done. And so I want to suggest to you tonight that if you're not in any kind of meaningful team or small group context, you're going to miss out on that. You're going to feel isolated, you're going to be a bit vulnerable, and you're going to lose any kind of sense of purpose in life. We're designed to be in team. And I just want to look at this chapter and really how God can shape us into a transforming team. In the same way that he did in this story, taking unskilled, dejected, depressed people and galvanizing them into a team that did that, I want us to look at 4 ways in which God will transform, shape us into being a transforming team that he can work through and get things done. The first of these is voluntary work for everyone. You know, there's something that's very infectious about a successful team and an enthusiastic team. When you're around a team like that, you don't have to volunteer. It's like you're compelled to become part of it. It kind of sucks you in. I'm sure many of you have been in very embarrassing and awkward situations where it's not felt like that. Maybe you've been in a situation where someone has been sitting in a team setting and identifying an unpleasant job that needs to be done and looking for a volunteer, and nobody wants to do it. Suddenly the floor is very interesting, people are fidgeting. It is just a very uncomfortable place to be. But compare that with a situation where, particularly as we're talking about here, a situation where God is at work in a situation. There's just something compelling about it. So that as soon as there's an opportunity to volunteer, everybody's on their feet, pumping the air, saying, I'll do it, count me in. And that is the feel of this situation in this chapter that we've been looking at here. And it's just as well. It needed to be that kind of response, because for all of Nehemiah's impressive qualities, he couldn't do that job of building the walls on his own. The project would have failed at the first big stone. He needed a whole army of people to come alongside him. And that's what we read, exactly what happened in this situation. And they came alongside despite knowing that they personally were going to find this a costly exercise. It was going to be exhausting. It was going to be dangerous and risky. And the really amazing thing about these names that are listed, it's not that just so many volunteered, but the incredible diversity of those that are involved. So you've got priests, you've got officials and rulers, you've got family groups, you've got different trades and crafts, you've got every different kind of people group that was in that city at that time. You've even got people coming in from other towns to join in. There's not a sense of what's in it for me or my group. There was a sense of being compelled because God is at work in them. It's an extraordinary feat of united action. And on behalf of the elders in this site this evening, I want to say we cannot build this site without you. And it's possible to come here on a Sunday evening, and a relatively few people have a public profile. Someone that's doing the teaching, the worship team, maybe one or two others. And it's possible to think that this event happens because of them. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. behind the public profile people, it takes a little army to get a Sunday meeting ready. People who are going to arrive early and go home late. People that are going to welcome you and greet you or pray for you after, make drinks for you, sell you books, clean the loos, unlock the doors. Masses of situations and circumstances in which people are serving. And I want to say to you that those of you that are on serving teams already, I just want to say thank you so very much. It can seem very mundane at times, but you are contributing to something very, very vital in terms of what God is doing in this city at this time. And if you're not involved in one of the serving teams, I want to say to you, there's plenty of scope for you to get on board. I hope that even by the end of this evening, you'll be feeling that same compulsion, not a reluctance, but a sense of, oh, please sign me up. I want to get involved in this project. It may be that you feel at this point you've got nothing to offer. Well, that doesn't matter, because the second feature that I want to look at in terms of how God shapes a transforming team is there's always on-the-job training. You know, that's the way that God loves to work. It's once we actually commit, once we actually volunteer, we say, count me in, it's then that he actually begins to do things in us and begins to train us and equip us for that role. And that was true in this story here in Nehemiah. Now, this is my hunch, but I would imagine back in 400 BC, maybe, just maybe, they were a more practically able culture than we are nowadays. Maybe they were used to doing things more with their hands than we are. That may be true, but nevertheless, they were still a very unskilled workforce. So when we read through that account, there's no references to builders and carpenters, nothing like that. But what they clearly did have was that they had a plan, they had a strategy, and that's important. People need to know that. Otherwise, things get very confusing. Sometimes here on a Saturday morning when we gather to pray, we go into the room, and for some reason the chairs haven't been set out. And so someone flings open the cupboard door, and about a dozen people, we pile in, and we all grab a few chairs. And I grab a few chairs and start chucking them around the room a bit, working to a plan I have in my mind. And then about a minute later, I look up to see how it's going, and I realize that the other 11 have all done the same thing. They've all thrown a few chairs around in plans that they had in their minds as well. And so you've got chairs pointing in all different directions, rows that don't meet up, rows with no gaps, so nobody could get in and sit down if they wanted to. And that's how it is if a team works together without any sense of plan. Imagine trying to build a city wall that way, just chucking a few bricks here and there. It would not have lasted very long at all. So there needed to be some organization for this team. There needed to be some training in that sense. And a job of that size can be very, very daunting. It can be so daunting that you never actually start. So the job was broken down into bite-sized chunks that were doable for different groups. So each group knew exactly where to start, exactly where to finish, how high they needed to go, how thick this thing needed to be, so they were organized. But an unskilled team needs more than organization. It needs supervision as well, and that's probably hinted at in verse 5. It's probably referring to the fact that there would have been supervisors of this work, and that would have been very necessary. I tend to wonder, I wonder what the wall would have looked like if there hadn't been any supervision. And I would imagine the goldsmiths would have just spent ages on a little bit of wall because they would be putting precious jewels and stones in it. And it would have looked great, but it wouldn't have got very high. And then there's the perfumers. And I reckon they would have wanted to design and build a gate that sprayed out fine fragrances as you went through. And all of that would have been very nice. But there was an urgency about this project. They had to get these walls up before their enemies realized what was going on and could do something about it. So these different trades and different crafts, they had to submit their personal preferences to those that were supervising the work. They had to lay them aside to get the job done. And you know, when God's at work amongst us, sometimes we just find we're able to lay aside our personal preferences and give ourselves to what the priority is in that particular moment. One of the heroes for me in this whole passage is Malchijah. You find him in verse 14. And he was a ruler, and he got the short straw, if you like, because he was allocated the dung gate. And if it was me there, I would have been putting in a bid for the fountain gate. That would have sounded much nicer, or it refers here to repairing the wall alongside the pool of Siloam. That would, to me, be a great place to build a wall, because you could just nip off for a dip in the heat of the day and then back onto the wall. Or some were repairing the house of the mighty men, it refers to later in the chapter. I'd love to be able to say I'd worked on the house of the mighty men, but Malchijah got allocated the dung gate, the dump, the horrible end of the city. You can imagine what it must have been like. He was a leader, but he took it on. He did it. I think that is wonderful. He was leading by example. He was willing to take on a less than pleasant task for the sake of getting this project done. And that's what a good team does. A good team will respond to less than attractive roles. And when God is at work in your heart, you'll find that you begin to do that yourself. Things that naturally you would recoil from, you will find you begin to volunteer for it and say, count me in. Unfortunately, the nobles of Tekoa, they're referred to in verse 5 here. This is where they missed it. They weren't willing to submit to on-the-job training. They saw it as beneath them, and it's a single jarring note in this whole chapter. It says they would not stoop to serve. What a misunderstanding of what leadership is. What a tragedy. They would not stoop to serve. They weren't willing to humble themselves before those that were supervising the work, presumably because it didn't advance their interests in any way. They felt it was below their station. The tragedy is that they're the ones that missed out in so many ways. So many other incredible names here in this passage. And this is a hall of fame. And these names, known by God, are in this hall of fame. The nobles of Tekoa, it's like the one name in the hall of shame in this passage, because they were not willing to stoop to serve. What a tragedy. The reality is, actually, really, without God's activity in this whole project, everybody could have missed it. They could have so easily missed this opportunity for God to use them in a big way, especially being in a dejected state as they were. If it were not for Nehemiah, one man full of the Holy Spirit who seized an opportunity with the king that he could so easily have missed himself, but he took it. And then God used him to inspire a whole crowd of people in the city, so that a city was rebuilt and effectively a nation was reborn. That was one man full of the Holy Spirit. What could God do with a room load like this? What could God do with a room full of people full of the Holy Spirit, submitted to godly authority, seizing opportunities in the realms of business and finance and health and medicine and education, justice, politics, and the arts, all kinds of areas where we need to rebuild and where God can use us to rebuild. Could not God use us, a room load like this, to transform this city and other cities beyond? I trust that God is in your own spirit right now, convincing you, yes, he can do that, and I want to be part of that. The third feature I want to look at of a team when God's at work in building a transforming team is it's a team that develops new skills, and that's what God does. He's not always interested in what we can offer him. He does give us gifts, and often they are utilized for his glory, but often he will want to develop other things in us as well that may not be so high up our agenda. You see, having a specialized gift in the community in Jerusalem, or having no gift at all, didn't constitute an excuse for not getting stuck in on the wall. The vast majority had to work outside their area of expertise. Personally, I dread to think how I would have fared. I am a walking DIY disaster area. I think I would have probably died on a project of this scale. But then again, if the perfumers managed it, then maybe I would have survived after all. But the perfumers certainly had to serve and work outside their area of expertise. I don't know what, this is probably a wrong impression, but when I think of perfumers, I think of those women that work in perfume departments, perfume sections of department stores. And I think of them as just spotlessly clean, elegantly dressed, heavily made up, long nails, beautifully turned out. Well, I'd wonder what it had been like if they turned up at their section on a Monday morning and were told, right, ladies, we've got something different for you today. And they're handed club hammers and goggles and overalls and said, today, instead of working on perfume, we're going to be out in the street, digging up the road, working on the main sewer. That's something of what it must have been like for these perfumers to work on the wall. I think their initial response was, can't we just kind of create a new perfume to combat the body odor of those that will be working on the wall? But actually, that wasn't their response. They got stuck in with everyone else. They were willing to step outside their area of expertise. And did you notice in verse 12, this guy with his daughters as well? It refers to his daughters serving, something that was their financial help. I like to think of them getting stuck in on the wall themselves. In fact, I would love to have taken a photo of them before the project and after the project. I reckon before the project, they would have looked like normal young women. At the end of the project, they would have had muscles like Popeye, and they were probably knocking back pints and pints of ale and wolf whistling the guys, things like that. It would have been a different kind of experience for them, but they got stuck in on the wall. And that's what a good team would do. A good team will be ready to step out of areas of expertise so that the job can get done. And you know, some people would disqualify themselves from serving in this church because they felt either they feel they've got a gift that there's no space for, or they feel they haven't got a gift at all. Actually, what God's looking for is your willingness. And he'll help with the rest. He'll provide the on-the-job training. He'll help you develop new skills. The last feature I want to look at of a team when God's involved, a transforming team, is double time available. Now that used to be a phrase that was used when you got double pay if you worked on a bank holiday or a weekend. I'm using it to show something very different, and that is that many people in this project put their lives on the line, not to work only on one section of wall, but somehow they had the capacity, energy, and motivation to double up and work on two sections of the wall. That is amazing. And you know, again, that's true of when God's at work. Because normally in a team, you would find people just go to they'll only go as far as they have to go. But when God's at work, you'll find that the team will go the extra mile. They will take on what they can. They'll do a double section of wall. And I know many in this church are doing double and triple sections of wall. There are many people in this church that serve on a Sunday rota, and yet at the same time, they're building the wall, as it says in this chapter, opposite their house. They're seeking to bring the presence of God to the places they live. Others are serving on Sunday rotas, but they're also building the wall with other groups, either the disadvantaged or the students or the elderly. And yet others are building the wall in their places of work and education. So there is scope to build many sections of this wall, to be involved in that and to give ourselves unreservedly to that. And we do that because God's at work in us, because He's put something in our hearts. He's inspired us to see something of what the city of His presence and His people could become with Him right at the center of it. A place where it's full of the love and the power and the presence of Jesus. It's a city with different kind of values, where all are welcomed and accepted, where people speak well of each other and others, where impossible prayers get answered, where the sexes know how to honor each other, where families get restored, where the lonely and the disadvantaged can find a refuge, where people can serve one another and the city we live in. Now, those kind of communities are not natural or normal. Those kind of communities only exist actually when Jesus is right at the heart of them, and when he transforms the hearts of those in those communities. You see, those kind of things I'm describing is exactly what Jesus is like. And in Matthew chapter 20, Jesus speaks these words, and he's describing himself. He says this: "Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." When God begins to work in our hearts, we begin to want to work on the wall. We begin to work on his church. Bill Hybels, a leader in the USA, I just want to read out a quote in one of his books on leadership. He's talking about the church, and he says this: "There's nothing like the local church when it's working right. Its beauty is indescribable, its power is breathtaking, its potential is unlimited, it comforts the grieving and heals the broken in the context of community, it builds bridges to seekers and offers truth to the confused. It provides resources for those in need and opens its arms to the forgotten, the downtrodden, and the disillusioned. It breaks the chains of addictions, frees the oppressed, and offers belonging to the marginalized of this world. Whatever the capacity for human suffering, the church has a greater capacity for healing and wholeness. Still to this day, the potential of the local church is almost more than I can grasp. No other organization on earth is like the church. Nothing even comes close. And we have the privilege of helping build a church like that. Why wouldn't you want to give your life to something like that? There's no greater thing happening in the world today. We can build something as a team that will last forever. So let us rise up and build in this site and in this church and in this city. I want to conclude by just particularly speaking to two particular groups as we close this evening. I want to speak to those that may feel that you've been around this church for a little while now and you're feeling somewhat on the edge of it. And those that you're feeling, even as a result of tonight, I think I do want to get involved. If you're feeling on the edge here tonight, maybe you've been coming for a while, you enjoy being in this kind of company, but somehow it's like you're a spectator and a participator. It's like you're in it, but you're not really fully of it. You don't feel that somehow you're right at the heart of this community. And maybe you're thinking, what have I got to do to get into it? And you've perhaps been coming for a few weeks and you're thinking, well, maybe I need to take out a standing order, or maybe I need to read the Bible through in a year, or join a serving team, or get to a few more prayer meetings. I want to say to you, no, it's none of those. The key to feeling right in the heart of this community is to meet the head of this community, to meet the father of this community, to meet God himself. And he wants to introduce his son to you, Jesus Christ. And this talk tonight has highlighted some of the issues that are there in our hearts. Some of those things actually isolate us from God. They offend God because there can be issues of our heart that actually we don't want to humble ourselves. We don't want to serve others. We want to pursue our own desires and our own agendas. And the more we do that, we find our hearts become enslaved to those desires. But you know that verse I read earlier, it said that Jesus came to serve us. He didn't come to be served. Jesus himself, the eternal Son of God, came to serve us. And he did it by giving his life as a ransom for many. And the word ransom is a word that's used for the payment required for the release of a slave. And you know, when Jesus is on the cross, he paid the price for you. He paid the judgment and the punishment you deserve for your heart, for its selfishness, for that which separates you from God. He paid the price for you. That debt is now paid so you can come to know him. And you can come to know him even tonight. And you'll find then you begin to feel right at the heart of this community. And so I want to encourage you, if that's your situation, come to Jesus tonight. If you feel you need more time, then that's fine. I would say come on Wednesday week to hear Daryl Tunningley at that Alpha course, hear how God transformed his heart. Know that if God can do it for him, he can do it for you. But secondly, if you're here tonight and you're feeling, I want to get involved, and I want to challenge you for that. I want to say, if someone's writing up the history of this era of the church, would your name be listed in it? Like these guys here in Nehemiah 3. Would your name be down there, working on the wall, taking this section or that section? And if somehow you've caught a fresh vision for what it means to be building a city for God tonight, building a glorious church, then why don't you sign up for a serving team? That's probably the easiest way to start. Just say, count me in. I'll submit my preferences. I'll be prepared to work outside of my comfort zone for a season at least. Count me in. And we would love to hear from you. There'll be opportunity for that later. I would just say that I've emphasized something of the sacrifice of serving tonight. I want to say to you that my own experience is the more I serve, actually the more I gain. You do sacrifice time and energy, but you gain a huge amount. When you say, count me in, I'm going to take responsibility in the church here. You get to meet people, you begin to make new friends, you're able to encourage them, they encourage you. God works on your character, especially if you're serving in unseen areas, or no one thanks you, or other person doesn't turn up when they should do, and you feel like you're doing 3 sections of the wall and everybody else is on a tea break. Or God does wonderful things in your character in making you more like his son. And above and beyond all that, it's just that sense of the joy of participating in something that is going to last forever. I wholly commend it to you and encourage you to sign up later. So I'm going to finish there just to say we've been building this church for 35 years now. And we're going into a new season. We've got sites across the city. We'd love to see more services, more cities in Europe. As God works in us and causes us to be a transforming team, I want you to begin to dream what might be possible in the next 35 years as we co-labor with God in building a wall and a city for him.